Good morning, class. It's Reader's Workshop time. Now, before I start the story, I have to go over certain things. We're in the area of fiction and traditional literature. I've picked traditional literature. I want you to focus on your voice fluctuation, how you change your voice during punctuation marks. So, as a review, when you see a period, you stop, take a breath, and then continue reading. Exclamation mark, you're excited or yelling. Question mark, you're asking a question and you're waiting for a response. Your voice naturally goes up. How are you today? Comma, you would find between words within a sentence. Stop, take a pause, take a deep breath and count to 3 and then continue reading. Quotation marks are marks around the words that someone or something has said, and that's where you change your voice to make the reading interesting. Besides voice fluctuation, changing your voice, I want you to focus on the characters, the people that are in the story, or the things that are in the story that are doing some talking. How are they? Are they nice? Are they mean? Are they cruel? Are they thoughtful? Are they generous? Are they young? Are they old? So, keep all of that in mind when you're reading. Make reading fun. So, here's a story you might have heard. There's many different versions of this, and it is called Hansel and Gretel. Adapted, that means the author wrote and tweaked the story and changed it, by Susan Lawrence. Illustrated, the person who did the pictures, by Doug Kuba. Hansel and Gretel lived with their parents in a tiny cottage in a tiny house at the edge of the forest. Their father was a simple woodcutter. He cut down trees. And although he worked hard, the family was very poor. Many times Hansel and Gretel had nothing but a crust of bread for their supper. At night, after Hansel and Gretel were in bed, their parents would talk in worried voices. Even though they whispered, Hansel and Gretel could hear what they said. "What is to become of us?" asked the father one night. "Soon we will not have enough money, even for flour." Flour meaning to make bread. "We will manage," Mother said. "I must go into the forest to find work," Father sighed. "Otherwise we will surely starve." Mother gasped. "There must be some other way," she replied anxiously. Then she calmed herself. "We will find one. Now let's get some rest." We can't let Father go," whispered Gretel to her brother from the bed. "What can we do?" "I will travel into the forest instead," replied Hansel. "Then I will come with you," said Gretel bravely. "The forest is very dangerous. You may need help." "Very well," said Hansel. "We will leave tonight." So they're going to go in the woods to see if somehow they can help Father. Before daylight, before the sun came up, Hansel and Gretel crept out of their beds and pulled on their clothes. Gretel collected some bread from the kitchen and stuffed it into her pocket. "I suppose it is not such a bad idea for you to come along," Hansel told Gretel, as they took the last look at their house and began walking into the dark forest. The children walked silently. They walked all day long through the tangled bushes and the tall trees. They walked until their feet hurt and their legs felt tired and heavy. "I did not realize the forest was so big," Gretel said. "Neither did I," said Hansel. "But don't worry. I had made sure that we will not get lost. I left a trail of breadcrumbs behind us in case we need to turn back." "You are very clever, Hansel," Gretel laughed. "Why do you laugh?" Hansel asked. "I have sacrificed my bread to help us." "Look," Gretel said, pointing behind them. 3 blackbirds hopped along and carefully eating each crumb Hansel had dropped. The trail Hansel had left for them had vanished completely, so there was no way to go back. The birds ate the bread. Hansel, here, eat some, Gretel said, trying to comfort her brother. She held out a piece of bread to him. I am not hungry anymore, Hansel said. By now the children were very tired. They continued to walk through the forest. Surely they would come across some place they could rest, or someone who would give them something small to eat. They were certainly lost now, and it felt as though they were walking in circles. They didn't know where they were at or where they were going. Night fell upon them and the forest, and strange noises came from behind the trees. Hansel and Gretel sat down and huddled against the cold. They were hugged towards each other, trying to stay warm. Did you hear that? Asked Hansel, reaching for Gretel's hand. It's only an owl, Gretel whispered. We should try to sleep now. Soon the children were asleep, dreaming of warm supper. In the morning they continued to walk. At first, to make the time pass, they sang songs that their parents had taught them. Soon they grew tired and hungry again and walked along in silence. After a while, the children entered the small clearing. They could not believe their eyes. Gretel, look, Hansel shouted. A cottage. Maybe whoever lives there will give us something to eat, said Gretel, eagerly excited. As the children hurried closer, they saw it was no ordinary cottage. It was walls made out of gingerbread, windows made out of clear sugar. It is the most beautiful house I have ever seen, said Gretel. It is the most delicious house I've ever seen, said Hansel, and he began to break off the frosting to eat. Wait, Gretel cried. We should see if anyone's home and ask before we eat. So here they are walking in the woods, and here's the beautiful cottage, small house made of sweets. The children knocked on the door, and after a moment it opened, and an old woman with a cane came out. Hello, the woman said sweetly. We have been traveling through the forest, Gretel said. We are very tired and hungry. May we rest here? And the old woman invited the children inside. She prepared them a meal of pancakes and rich syrup, maple syrup. Then she showed them two beds that were covered with soft down, soft feathers. That's in the old days, that's what they did. That's what kept you warm. But in the morning, as the children woke up, the old woman grabbed Hansel and locked him into a cage. She's a witch, Hansel cried inside the cage. That's right, the witch shouted. I am a witch, and you will be my supper once you are good and fat. For the next few weeks, the witch made sure Hansel had plenty to eat. Gretel was given only crusts of bread. Each morning, the witch would stand by Hansel's cage and say, Stick out your finger so I can see how plump you are. But Hansel was clever. He knew that the witch could not see very well, and instead of his finger, he would stick out a thin little chicken bone that Gretel had managed to pass to him secretly. The witch would say, feeling the chicken bone. What a scrawny thing you are. That means you're really small. You must eat more. Then the witch would yell at poor Gretel to bring Hansel more food. One morning, the witch ordered Gretel to fetch some water. Whether Hansel is fat or lean, she said, today I will cook and eat him. I have waited long enough." "No!" Gretel shouted. "You stubborn child, do as I say," the witch demanded impatiently. She couldn't wait anymore. But Gretel would not move. The witch pushed Gretel up to the oven. "Check the oven to make sure it's hot enough." Gretel knew better than to trust the old witch. "No," Gretel said, "I don't know how to check." "Then I will do it myself," shouted the witch. She shoved Gretel aside. She pushed her over. Then she hobbled over to the oven and poked her head inside. Just as she did, Gretel gave her a push, and the witch fell right into the oven. And Gretel quickly slammed the iron door and bolted it, locked it, so that the old witch could not get out. "I told you that you would need my help," Gretel said as she opened the door of Hansel's cage. Hansel sprang out and hugged her. With nothing else to fear, the children sat down and enjoyed a feast of cookies, fresh bread, and candies. Before they left the cottage, the children gathered food to eat during their long journey home. Now, here's the hot oven where the witch burnt. And here's the good food that the kids are eating now that the witch is gone. So think about the character of the witch. Think of Hansel and Gretel. As they wandered through the house searching for food, Hansel and Gretel discovered that the boxes of pearls and precious stones, that means that gave them a lot of money. The children stuffed their pockets with the jewels and filled large sacks with many cakes and candies and cookies as they could carry. "Let's hurry home," Gretel said. "I am sure that Mother and Father are dreadfully worried by now." The children set off through the forest without a trail to lead them. As they walked, they fed the birds with crumbs and sang happily. After days of walking, the children came to a place in the woods that looked familiar. They could see their own little cottage through the trees, so they finally found their way back. The children began to run. "Mother, Father, we are home at last," they shouted joyfully. When Mother and Father heard their calls, they ran to meet them. They hugged Hansel and Gretel for a very long time. "Look what we have brought," said Hansel. He took the jewels out of his pockets and laid them on the table. "We will never be hungry again." "You are very good children," said Father, "and very brave, but you must promise me that you will never go into the forest again, for it is a very dangerous place." Hansel and Gretel looked at each other and smiled. "We promise," they said. Here's the gingerbread house. They're leaving. Here they found their home and joining back to Mother and Father with all the jewels, so they won't have to starve again. So now it's your time for reading. Read to your brother, read to your sister, read to your aunt, uncle, cousins, grandma, grandpa. Find a book to read to them. If you have to repeat the same book, repeat the same book. Practice makes perfect. You don't have a book? Go to the district website, a class tag, look at one of the reading pages that was put there, and read. If you don't have anyone to read to a toy or read to one of your pets at home. If that's not any good, then you play teacher and read aloud. And don't forget to fluctuate, change your voice with punctuation marks, and think about the characters. How are they? Are they scary? Are they nice? Are they mean? Are they thoughtful? Okay? So until next time, happy reading. Miss you guys and girls.